to be joined by Cade Wilcox and Dr. Justin Louder today, who will visit with us about how to succeed while working from home. I know this is new territory for many of us, so hopefully everyone can come away with one or two strategies or tricks to help us get through the upcoming weeks. So I'll start by introducing Cade. Cade is the owner and CEO of Primitive Social, a digital solutions agency here in Lubbock. They are focused on helping companies grow through branding, software development, website design and development, and content marketing. Primitive has over 60 employees located all over the country, and they've been distributed for the past 3 years. And Cade also owns Elevate Accounting, 33 North Strategies, Fastway Payroll, and Inspire Labs Coding Academy. With us today, we also have Dr. Justin Louder. Justin Louder serves as Associate Vice Provost for Texas Tech University e-learning and academic partnerships, where he's the primary consultant for college and department leaders on the development of new high-demand e-learning degree and certificate proposals. He oversees Blackboard support and instructional design, as well as compliance and regulation for online regional site programs. In addition, he's the interim superintendent for Texas Tech K-12, leading a number of initiatives to modernize and streamline technology and best applied practices to online programs in the unit. In this role with TTU K-12, Dr. Louder recently facilitated the partnership with LBK TV for the CyberSafe initiative, educating the Lubbock community about online safety, especially for kids in the digital world. Dr. Louder is also a past recipient of the Lubbock Chamber's Top 20 Under 40 Award. I think Cade is going to kick things off, and then after that, we will turn things over to Dr. Louder. Keep in mind, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, so please, as things come to you, feel free to enter it in the chat box. And I am going to turn things over to Cade.
Thanks, Sabine. I really appreciate it. And thanks for having me on this call, Kyle and others who put this together. It's nice to meet many of you, although I can only see your name and a bunch of mute signs. So it's good to, I guess, quote, see you. And thanks for having me. So as Sabine mentioned, we've been a distributed company for over 3 years. About 25 to 30 of our employees actually live in Lubbock. We obviously have an office in downtown, but most of them even work remotely most of the week. And then the rest of our team is literally all over the country. We have three full-time teammates in Pakistan, one in Lebanon, one in Japan, and so a handful of even international team members. And so we've learned a lot about remote work through failure. So we absolutely did not get it right early on, and even now we're still learning. But it's been a really great experience, and it's really that experience, that I'm going to draw on, here during this call and just share a handful of other things. The other thing that's exposed me to remote work is several years ago, I started a project called Rural and Remote, which helps people in rural communities in the 8-state area of the Ogallala Aquifer get connected to remote jobs, as well as learn computer programming to capitalize on tech jobs. And so have been introduced to a lot of thought leaders and experts in remote work. And so I've learned a lot from them as well. So our experience with remote work is pretty deep. And so these are some of the things that I would encourage you to consider if you're now working remotely or being thrust into remote work kind of as a full-time gig here recent with what's going on. So 5 quick things, and then I'll hand it over to Justin. And I think both of us are excited to get to your questions. Q&A is always the most fun thing about these types of things. And so I'll be fairly brief and then hand it over to Justin. The number one thing I'd encourage you to consider if you're being thrust into remote work is self-care. And so going into working remotely with a really intentional, specific kind of a process or plan in place on how you're going to stay healthy. One of the unique things about remote work, particularly at a time like this, where literally your remote work is at your home. You're not working remotely from a coffee shop or some other location, but you're at home, is you're going to be at home 24 hours a day. And so if you're not really intentional about how you're going to manage your work, when you're going to work, when you're going to take care of yourself, eating real food, sleeping, drinking lots of water, exercising, real practical things, you have to think through how you're going to care for yourself, so that what ends up not happening is you never leave work. And so if you don't have a real clear plan for how you're going to care for your emotional, spiritual, and physical health, it's going to take a back seat. and eventually it's gonna, you know, it's gonna impact you greatly. And so the number one piece of feedback I could give you is really go into this experience working remotely with an intentional plan on how you're going to care for your own health, so that you can be your very best self for your teammates, for your organization, for your clients, or for whatever work that you're in. And that's why the self-care is so critical. It's not just for you, it's also so that you can be your best self for the people you're working with. The second thing I would encourage you to consider is creating daily rituals. So this is a really big deal, again, because you're going to be, you know, never going to be leaving work for the foreseeable future. You're going to wake up and you're going to be at work. You're going to go to bed and you're going to be at work, and you're going to, you know, have this propensity to work all the time because you're available to work, because, you know, there is no separation from home and work, at least for the foreseeable future. Is come up with daily routines. You know, if you're used to working in an office, then treat your day as you would if you were going into the office. So if you wake up and you have breakfast, then wake up and have breakfast. If you wake up and work out, then wake up and work out. If you take walks before you go to work, then continue to take walks before you go to work. But think through these normal daily rituals that you're going to implement that allows you to maintain a healthy balance between being at home and working at home. And again, if you're not really intentional about this, you'll find yourself feeling this emotional burden and pressure to always be working because you don't have anything else that you're doing. And so you feel the stress or this urgency to always be working. And so think through for you what your daily rituals, things like, you know, if you're used to dressing up, then keep dressing up, right? Like dress for work, just as if you were going to work. And it helps you mentally be able to balance and protect these important balances between work and home. And so think through what routines that are really healthy for you and that you can implement to protect your time and, again, your own personal health. So think through self-care, think through daily routines. This third one is similar to daily routines, but it's what I'd call an ideal work week. This is not my idea. If you just Google Michael Hyatt ideal work week, that guy is literally the expert in ideal work weeks. But again, it's all geared towards being really intentional about how you're going to organize and schedule your week so that you can be both personally healthy and professionally healthy. And so I won't go into that much. Again, Michael Hyatt is an absolute expert in that. But as many of you may find yourself having to kind of, you know, work differently given the current circumstances, I think mapping out your week similarly to mapping out your daily routines and mapping out how you're going to do self-care would bring you great value as you're kind of thrust into this remote work, and not just thrust into remote work in general, but remote work from home 7 days a week, which is, you know, kind of an extreme way to be introduced to remote work. The fourth thing would be just some technical feedback. I call it a tech stack internally at our organization. And when I do other webinars on remote work is, what is your tech stack? And so I'll keep it really simple if I were you. But there's a really big difference in experience, both for you as a remote employee, as well as your teammates and your clients who you're working with remotely, when you have a really good tech stack. So obviously, you know, you need to think through your computer. Many of you have already done that. But you obviously need a good computer, and you want to think through the quality of your video on said computer. And so you want to think through your computer, you want to think through your video, you want to think through lighting, and you want to think through audio. Last night I had a call with Mayor Pope, with Dan, to talk about Zoom, because all of a sudden he's having all these calls on Zoom, and we were talking about lighting, and we were talking about audio, and we were talking about really simple ways to make sure you're looking into the computer and not down or up at the computer. So when you think about your tech stack in terms of working remotely, think about really small things. Think about lighting. Think about cheap microphones that are much better. They're cheap and affordable, but they're much better than your native audio in your computer itself. Think about you know, headphones and the way that the people you're interacting with remotely are going to experience you and you them. And again, when you think through these really simple things, it really enhances the experience between not just for you, but also the people that you're working remotely with. We're really particular about this at Probative. When we have all of our all-team meetings, they're very similar to this, but there was 60 people. Everyone's on mute, but everyone's camera's on. We have like specific requirements of our entire team as it relates to communicating remotely, so that we're enhancing the experience of being connected together. And so if you're leading a team, think through those things, or contribute to your organization by thinking through all these small things that really enhances the experience for all involved. And then lastly, and this one's really obvious, but I think it might even be the most important feedback that I could give, and that is communication. When you work in an office, communication is still extremely important, but on certain levels, it's a little bit easier because you can just walk down the hall and talk to someone and you're face to face, and you can see body language and you can hear tone of voice, and it's just a little easier to communicate. And so one thing about working remotely is you have to even be more intentional about communication. You have to be consistent. One thing you'll notice about working remotely is if you're used to talking to a certain teammate because you're office mates or whatever, all of a sudden now, like, you have to be super intentional about staying connected and communicating. You have to be really intentional about what mode of communication you're gonna choose as it relates to communication. So for example, if what we talk about in our organization is something is super sensitive, or if it's highly emotionally charged, or whatever the case may be, then that needs to be a Zoom call, face-to-face, both cameras are on, and you're hashing out the conversation directly. Never communicate about things that are urgent or sensitive or emotionally charged through Slack or through an email. Always do it face-to-face. Other things about communication, for example, can be taking into consideration the personality of your teammates. And so really seek to understand the person that you're communicating with and shape your communication around some of their preferences or their personality. So the real main point about communication is you have to be intentional, really, really intentional about communication. Not only about communication just in general and doing it because now you're a bit more isolated than you normally would be, but take into consideration all these other factors related to communication to, again, really enhance the quality of your experience working remotely, and the rapport that you have with your team. So those are the 5 most practical things that we've learned over 3 years and are continuing to learn about, that I think if you were to be really intentional, really specific about, and go into this experience you're about to have kind of eyes wide open with a plan, I think it would bring you a lot of value. So that's what I wanted to share with you. So with that, Justin, I'll hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Cade. And Kyle and Sabine, thank you for setting this up and asking me to speak. When we discussed this setup, we talked, and it was great for Cade to start because many of the tips that I have for the education side are going to be very similar to the ones he had on the working side. I'm going to kind of split my time with you. First, I'm going to talk about many of you or you could be in school getting an undergraduate degree or graduate program. So I'm going to talk about from the student standpoint of how you should look at this and this change. But then I'm going to talk about from you as the parent standpoint, and maybe you're helping your kids at home transition to this work from home or this school from home situation. So this is a very difficult time, and I know that, and we've all been thrust into working and doing school from home in a very short amount of time. Typically, when I work with a faculty member, I tell them it takes between 3 and 6 months to develop a really good online class. And of course, we don't have 3 to 6 months to do this. We've had 2 weeks. So if you're in college taking classes at Tech or Wayland, South Plains, or Lubbock Christian or anywhere else, think about that. Your faculty members have been thrust into this just as quickly as you have if we're going online. And so they've had 2 weeks to do that. What we recommended to our faculty at Texas Tech is to really put the big things that they need to get across for the last little bit of the semester to their students. So to focus on things like big assignments or group work, things that can transition to an online environment, whatever that might be, very quickly, so that you continue to have the great instruction that you've had, just done a little differently. So the 5 tips that I'm going to have for a student taking online courses, these work for higher ed and K-12 students as well. Like I said, they're very similar to what Kate talked about, but I'm coming at them from an educational standpoint. One of the most important things to remember, especially with this shift for either you or your children, is that to treat an online class the same as you would a face-to-face class. And to realize that the work required may be different, but it's going to be similar to what you would do in a face-to-face class. Many faculty have decided to still offer classes via Zoom or Collaborate or Skype for Business, so they still want to see their students. And so know that some of the classes will still be offered at the same time that they were offered in the face-to-face environment, because they want to have that social connection with you. So treat these online classes just as you would your face-to-face. It is very easy to get behind in an online or a remote class because you aren't seeing someone. You may not be seeing somebody every day. There's not somebody reminding you or a seatmate or somebody that you're sitting next to in the classroom to remind you when things are due. So treat them at the same way as you do face-to-face. And secondly, much like Kate talked about time management, I'll talk about that, but it's really important to develop a schedule with these online classes or these remote classes, is to sit down and write out a schedule. What I'd recommend is one document that lists all the classes you're taking or participating in, and when everything is due coming up. So you have a quick and easy way to open up a document on your computer to see these assignments and when things are due. Like I said, it's very easy to get behind in an online class because there's not somebody there reminding you every day when something's due. So you want that reminder, that document that you can say, oh, today I need to do X for this class, and I need to turn in this assignment for my other class. And oh, I have a group meeting with my third class, and I all know that that's coming up this week. It helps with the time management because as we're working from home now, as Kate talked about, 24/7 in our houses, we have to have that work time, whatever that might be, is that 8 to 5 or whatever it is for you, and then you've got to develop the school time to do your coursework. And if you don't have that schedule, you're going to start doing work at midnight and schoolwork at 2 a.m. and then it's going to get off. And back to Kate's point about self-care, if you're starting to work, between 8 a.m. and 2 a.m. and only taking a couple hours of rest for you, that self-care goes out the window. So set up a schedule so you can manage your time. And it may need to go as far as putting in work hours and school hours if you're taking classes, so that you have a differentiation between, okay, now I am doing my schoolwork and I'm not going to work on my job at this point. And the same thing when you're working on your job, say, I'm not going to look at my schoolwork. You've got to have that differentiation because you're at the same place all day. For third, you need a place to sit down and work. And this has been a struggle for a lot of students, especially at Tech. We've heard from a lot of students that have told us that they went up to the library to do their schoolwork. And of course, now that's not an option. So you've got to have a dedicated place. And you want it to be as dedicated as possible so that this is my school. This is where I'm doing my schoolwork. If it has to be the dining table, it has to be the dining table. If you've got a card table and you've got something you can just set up and say, this is now where I'm going to do all of my schoolwork. So you have that dedicated space. Do that. Just so once again, it's keeping it clear in your mind when I'm at school, when I'm not at school. We also, in addition to a dedicated space physically, set up a dedicated space on your virtual devices. So on your laptop or your tablet, whatever you might be using to do your schoolwork, make sure you have a dedicated folder and a dedicated system to save all of this work, so you don't have to hunt and find it. This is very new for many people to go to school online, in addition to working at a distance. So there's going to be some frustrations, and to limit the frustration factor is one thing that I encourage all of our students to do. So have that folder set up on your desktop, and this is where I put all of my schoolwork. Have individual folders for individual classes, something that it makes it organized so that everything that I'm doing for my class goes here, so that you don't have to hunt for something at the last minute. Remember, your faculty, many of them have had to make this transition very quickly. So they're having to set up these schedules too. So you may get a last minute email from a faculty member saying, hey, remember, this assignment is due today. I'm sorry I forgot to remind you, but it is due by 5 o'clock today. Please email it to me, or something like that. And if you get this last minute request from a faculty member, you already know that you're organized and you have all your materials in one folder. You can open it up and you can send it in and turn it into your faculty member. And the last kind of point for you as the student that I want to talk about is the importance of presence, being present in your online class. If your class is meeting face-to-face like we are today, is turning that webcam on, turning that microphone on. If your dog walks through the frame or if your kid walks through the frame, that's not a problem. We are all doing this from home. We know what's going to happen. And many times, having that little bit of levity in the class is what we need. We need to see, the kid walk in and talk to mom or dad on the screen. You need the dog or the cat to walk through it. It kind of breaks it up. It makes it a little more human. So be present in your online classes. So if that's doing a synchronous session or a video session like we are today, do that. If it's participating in online discussion boards or responding to emails from your colleagues or your co-students or your professor, do that. It's the sense of presence. We may not be physically together, but we can still have the sense of community in our online classes. So those are really the 5 main points that I wanted to make is for you as the student. Now, for you as the homeschool teacher, so I know, we have changed the paradigm of how we live and work right now in the last 2 weeks. We're working from home, we're attending school from home, and now many of you get to be your kids' teacher at home as well. And so it's just as important for your kids as they go to school from home is to give them a set schedule. One thing that their students have when they go to school at Lubbock ISD or Lubbock Cooper, they have a schedule. They know every morning from 8 to 9 they may have math, and then from 9 to 10 they have English and that. You need to set that schedule for your kids as well. They need that structure. Now it doesn't have to be as rigid as in the school day. So take the time to go outside and walk around. Take the time to enjoy being together as a family when you can. One example that I saw just this week from a friend of mine who works at Tech and is also homeschooling their children, is they did a moon rock hunt. They went outside with their kids and they looked for certain types of rocks. So right there, they were getting some quality time together with their kids. They were getting some very important sunlight and vitamin D that way, and they were kind of having a geology lesson right there, looking for different rocks. And so it did all 3 things at once, and it allowed them to break up their day a little bit. So come up with that schedule, but allow for some of those periods of rest, periods of interaction with your son or daughter or kids going through that. So it's just as important for your kid to have a dedicated space. Once again, that doesn't mean go out and buy a desk. I mean, if you want to do that, but it could be a simple card table. It could be a simple TV tray set up, but give them a dedicated space to do their schoolwork. And so that they know that every day, this is where they go to school. I might recommend not doing it in their bedroom because they need a space, just like we all do, to get away from and unplug from school. So, probably let them have their bedroom for their toys and their fun time, and have another space, if you can, for them to do their schoolwork. Many families are now juggling using one device for multiple people. So if you only have one laptop at home and you need to use it for work for a couple of hours, give your son or daughter a reading assignment or give them a book. Say, go out and read this, or go out and play, and then a couple hours later, you'll get the laptop. I know it's difficult. Many people don't have multiple devices at home. And although school districts have been providing some devices for students and doing a great job, many schools can't do that. So if you're sharing a device, set up a time and keep that time situated for your kid. The other thing I want to say, especially to moms and dads that are now teaching at home, I know the vast majority of you did not go to school to get an education degree. So you're sitting there and going, what do I do? Reach out to your students' teachers. They are still there to help you. Reach out to ask questions. They've either provided packets or online resources for you to use, but use the teacher for some help as well. They're there to help you. The next couple of months are going to be stressful. There will probably be tears if you're teaching your kids at home, either from you or from the kids. There may be arguments, and that's okay. It's going to happen. We're all living in a very stressful time. But reach out for the support that you already have from your friends and family members and teachers. They're all there to help you. And there are hundreds and hundreds of websites with free resources for parents as they transition online, for ebooks and digital resources, worksheets, and all things like that. In the chat, I'm going to put a link to a website that's called Amazing Education Resources. And this is a list of about hundreds of companies that are providing free resources for parents right now and college students right now. I'm not endorsing any of them. I'm just providing the information, but it's all available. And so you can pull up sheets from early childhood, kindergarten, all the way up to high school to help with this transition. But for the parent now teaching, the big thing is set a schedule for your kid. Give them their own dedicated space to do their schoolwork. Reach out to the teachers, the counselors, the principals at your schools for help. They're there to help you. Reach out for those people, and understand that there'll be good days and bad days. We didn't all go to school to be educators, and that's okay. Know that at the end of the day, you're helping your student, you're educating your student, really by being there with them and having that time with them. They will learn by seeing what you do and learn from you. And so know that it's okay that there's a tears one day, it's okay if there's an argument one day. It's okay if you take a day off and you say, you know what, today we're not going to do schoolwork. We're just going to play, or we're going to go outside and enjoy, the time in our backyard or at the park. Maintaining social distance when appropriate out in public, of course, but do that. And so those were really the big points I wanted to make, both for you as now the distant student, but also you as the homeschool teacher. And I think what we wanted to do for a good amount of time today is leave time for your questions. So I'll turn it back over to Kyle and Sabine, and look forward to answering the questions.
Okay, guys, so if y'all have any questions, again, add them to the chat. I'm going to start with one that we had sent in ahead of time. So, as you guys know, keeping our social distance obviously can be sort of stressful, and I know you guys touched on this some, but do y'all have any sort of additional tips on how to still feel connected to people when you're learning or working from home?
So I'll start for the learning side. It's set up those times to meet with your peers. So if hopefully you have names and email addresses of people that you were in class with, and you can set up a simple FaceTime call with people just to get that connection and talk to them, check in on people. I'm also recommending our tech faculty to make sure they check on students, not just about coursework to make sure they're doing okay, but just reach out. I think is an important thing, especially with either your professors, your student teachers, or the others you were in classes with.
Oh, I got all kinds of ideas for you here. The number one thing I think is critical of every organization, even if this is a temporary thing for you, is someone has to own employee communication, employee care, and how the team is going to stay connected. In our organization, we have a chief of staff. Her name is Annie. She's a licensed counselor. She has one job, and that is our people and our culture. And so for our organization, she owns how our team communicates and how we care for one another and how we stay engaged. Practically speak, so that's my first piece of advice. My second thing is way more practical, which is we have happy hours where we'll have 30-something people, having a drink together. Annie put on recently a pet show. So you can imagine how many pets, our team has, they all work remotely and there's 60 of them. So we had a pet show. We have a trivia night last Friday night at 9 o'clock. There were about 20 people having a trivia show, doing a trivia deal together. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that you can do. Another cool thing is sometimes people just set up work blocks together. So literally everyone's doing their own thing. You're working just like you would be working in an office, but on Zoom and on your extra monitor, you got 6 of your coworkers, you're listening to music, you're talking, but you're doing it in as you work, as if you were sitting at a coffee shop. So there's all kinds of practical things that you can do to stay connected, but probably the most important thing related to all of that is someone owning it, because what you don't do intentionally will never happen, right? It won't happen accidentally. And so that's, those are some things that I would share.
Awesome. Thank y'all. Okay, we have a question from Victoria Whitehead. She asked, how can some of us that are younger employees help our older generation coworkers warm up to this new normal?
I think the first thing I would encourage you to do is to a couple of things. Number one is, ask them, what they're looking forward to about remote work or what their concerns about remote work are. But just be really direct about understanding, how they feel about remote work. You may be surprised and they may be excited about it, or, they may share all their concerns with you, but either way, being really direct and intentional about asking them, what they think and how they feel is really critical. And the reason it's critical is then it allows you to really seek to understand before being understood. And so, if you know that they have certain limitations technologically speaking, or they're concerned about something, you can do your part as a good teammate to really think through how you then can work remotely that would support and set them up for the greatest amount of success. And so first, I'd be really direct and ask them questions and really seek to understand how they truly feel about it. I wouldn't make any assumptions. That they either like it or don't like it. I would ask directly and get their feedback. And then I would channel or shape how you communicate and how you work remotely around some of their preferences, so that you can kind of help them warm up to it by seeing, that it is very possible based on their preferences and personality, to work remotely. So that's how I would approach it. But I'd just be really direct and open in your communication and really, seek to understand how they truly feel about it, and be really careful not to make any assumptions about how they think or how they feel about it.
Dr. Lauder, do you have anything you would add to that?
No, I think that's great. But and I say no, and I'll say yes. Sorry. One thing I'd also say is that what we have found in higher ed is, even though many of our younger students are what we call digital natives, so they've all grown up with technology, a lot of younger individuals are still not comfortable working from home. So I think the advice Kate gave you is great for all of your employees, not just those that may be in the older generation, but also some of the younger ones that really thrive in that face-to-face environment, and that's where they want to be. And so also I think reaching out to them is important.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, we got another question about technology and broadband access in more rural areas. So a lot of folks may be working from shallow water, Abernathy, etc., and may not have the infrastructure that they're used to. So how can folks adapt when they maybe don't have the same level of technology that they would have at the office?
My experience and what's unique about this question for me is, again, the rural and remote project that I started and manage works in 8 states, only in rural communities. And I have been shocked and surprised at how it's not been a huge issue, both from a technology, like hard technology, like good computers and good technology, but also broadband issues. And so Justin may very well have a different experience. But I personally live in shallow water, have no issues whatsoever with connectivity. I work with literally hundreds and hundreds of people in rural communities, and very rarely have any issues whatsoever. Even another case in point would be my mother-in-law is a technology director of a small school in Clarendon, Texas, and all of their students have MacBooks. And so a lot of schools seem to have really good even technology tools and utilization. So I think it's a really great question, but based on my own personal experience, it really has not had any limitations or any issues that I have noticed. Justin, would you have a different perspective?
No, I agree completely with the federal E-rate grants and things like that school districts got during the 90s and early 2000s to get broadband to schools. Part of some of those grants were to also provide broadband connectivity in the rural communities. So many communities have capabilities and set up just like they would in a large metropolitan area. It may be limited in terms of the companies that provide it, but I haven't seen any major issues there right now.
One thing I might add, Kyle, because it's a great question, is there's a website called flexjobs.com, and they create a tremendous amount of content around remote work. And so you could just easily find some really good blogs and resources on how to set up a home office and what tools you need. And so even if someone doesn't have any limitations, but they just don't know what tools to set up or what their tech stack should be, there's all kinds of resources. And if that's relevant to someone on this call, I'm happy for you to email me, and I can give you a whole list of small tools, big tools, both cloud-based technology, hardware-based technology that I use. And I think people would be surprised at how little you really need to be really, really effective at remote work. I don't know, Sabine, if you want me to just take this next question in the chat box. You want me to?
Yeah. Definitely. I'll briefly read it out loud for everybody. But yeah, the question that we got is, are there any present concerns about computer security with any of the major video conferencing software, such as Zoom, which we're using right now, Skype, Google Hangout, etc.? So yeah, go ahead.
I think there's zero concerns. These are world-class tools that millions of people have already been using for years and years and years. If anybody on this call bought stock in Zoom before all this, you're a genius. There are zero challenges with security related to the tools listed, and quite frankly, a lot of the other tools like Slack or Gmail products. So our organization has never had any problems nor any concerns. Justin, any input there?
So what we're seeing in higher ed and K-12 schools that have started using Zoom is a phenomenon, but it's not a new phenomenon. It's Zoom bombing, where people jump into open Zoom rooms and either post inappropriate content or take over the meeting or things like that. So a couple of tips that we've been recommending for faculty is that if they're going to use Zoom, make sure it has a passcode on it and provide it to their students. So that the people going into the room or those that are invited. We recommend not posting the Zoom link or the Collaborate link or Skype, Google Hangout in social media, which would allow for anybody to log into it. So kind of manage that. Now, of course, if you're meeting with clients and things like that, it's a little different. But we've seen a lot of things happen where individuals are kind of lurking in Zoom and they find an open room and then they start posting inappropriate content. Those of you that are teaching kids at home, especially those younger age kids, I know many schools are using Zoom. One thing that I've seen and I've written to some colleagues at K-12 districts, it's great to be able to see all the kids again, and many teachers are having Zoom meetings with their students. But sometimes they may take a screenshot of the picture of all the kids on the screen and post it and say, how great it is to see all these kids again. Remember that social media is not private. Even if you think you have a private account, there's still ways to get that. So be careful with some of those things. But utilize the tools that are built into these softwares like Zoom and Skype and Google Hangout to make sure that you don't get bombed and things like that. They're great tools in terms of security and hacking and things like that. It's very rare that'll happen, but just use the tools that are available to keep it a little more secure.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Haley Wills asked, what are your experiences with Facebook Live or YouTube Live capabilities?
Go ahead, Justin. I've been going first. You take this.
Yeah, no problem. So we've utilized both. for different things at Texas Tech. Of course, the internet that you are using to stream the video onto either Facebook or YouTube can become problematic. And so there are a lot of people utilizing the system or the signal. You could have bandwidth issues with a Facebook Live or a YouTube Live. And then, so you could have bandwidth issues on uploading the video, which would slow down or provide give problems that way. And if you get too many people watching it live, you can see some issues. We see it with the live news reports all the time. If somebody goes onto Facebook or YouTube Live to watch a live news report, they get too many people on there. If they've not adequately, planned for that, you can get some slowdown, some pixelation, and some dropping of the calls. So I think one consideration is to make sure that if you're uploading video, that you have as few devices utilizing that same signal as possible, so that you maintain all the bandwidth for the video upload. And then understand that these are not unlimited systems. You can't. It'd be very hard to have tens of thousands of people watching the same YouTube Live or Facebook Live system and not see some kind of degradation. So understand that there could be some limitations on both ends. But that'd be my initial thoughts. Kate?
Yeah, I would echo all that. I mean, they're both great tools. I mean, I think so much, like most of life, depends on all the variables in the context in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And so thinking through what your end goal is, who your audience is, what you're trying to communicate can all impact what tools that you use. I'm looking at your follow-up question about, security. I don't think there's there's no security issues in my opinion there. YouTube and Facebook are, multi-billion-dollar companies. So, I mean, these are products that have been used for a long time, not just now. But then with the bandwidth thing, again, there's a lot of variables. I think the best advice I would give you, if you're working remotely and you're doing things that require a tremendous amount of bandwidth consistently, is think through the actual hardware and technology you're using for your internet. So do you have a router that came out of a box with your internet provider, or have you got one off Amazon that has multiple antennas and creates better connectivity? What are you doing to strengthen connectivity throughout your house? Is your home office or work set up really close to your internet? If you're going to do a ton of live streaming and video stuff for your work, maybe you need to directly connect to the internet versus using Wi-Fi. If you've got kids, get them off their iPads while you're doing calls. So, I mean, from a bandwidth standpoint, it's really hard to know because there's so many variables there, but those are some practical things you can look into if you're having problems or if you're anticipating having problems with your internet.
Okay, we've got another question. Any tips if the clients we're attempting to reach have limitations to A, access to technology, or B, they're not familiar with using technology? Are there any simple programs that don't require an app download or creating a profile?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like you answered. Well, I would, yes, consider what limitations your clients have, and then communicate with them appropriately. I probably, and I don't know your industry, but I probably wouldn't ask your clients to do anything different that you anticipated being very uncomfortable for them or more, difficult than it would be worth. And so, for example, if they have, if they don't have computers with cameras, or they're not real attuned to downloading apps in order to communicate, then I would not set up a channel of communication that would require them to do that. I would just call them, or keep it as simple as possible. This kind of goes back to what I was saying in terms of even internal communication, which is really understanding the circumstances, the personality, the preferences of the people you're communicating with. And so you're going to know your clients really well. If you think they're open to new technology, then I would submit those things to them as a way to enhance the quality of your communication and experience during this time. But if hey, they're going to have tremendous limitations, then don't ask them to use Zoom, or don't ask them to download Slack, or whatever. Just communicate to them based on what you believe to be their limitations or their preferences. And so that's how I would handle that if I were you.
And I completely agree. from my standpoint, education-wise, use the technology they have available. If it's just a cell phone, just call them. If it's just a FaceTime meeting, we just a FaceTime meeting. But yeah, I agree completely.
I would say it doesn't hurt to ask them. You might be really surprised. What they're willing and open to do. And so again, if a lot of times it's the thought that matters. So like if you tell them, hey, we'd love to really connect face to face during this interesting season, you may be really surprised at their openness and willingness to figure out, even if it's a bit difficult. And so always being direct and clear in your communication up front is a really good approach, and that helps you kind of shape how then you're going to communicate with each other.
Okay, we have another question from Alexander on when downloading apps and creating a profile and linking Facebook with these apps, is it better to not link them with social media?
So I'll jump in from an educational standpoint. If you're downloading Zoom or any of these products and you're linking your social, think about, is it something you want your professor or your instructor to have access to and see, and what you're posting on there? I try personally to limit what I'm linking through certain things. Typically, I try just to do LinkedIn if it's more of a professional thing, and I try to keep Facebook more as my personal. That's a personal opinion, and things like that. So I think it's a thing is, do you want your client or your professor or your kid's teacher to see those pictures or things on social media? And that's kind of where I would draw the line. But I don't work in the business world day to day like Kate does. He may have a different opinion.
Mine would be very similar. I something Justin mentioned earlier is really controlling access to those things. So like not like putting them out there publicly, unless unless the situation really warrants it. For example, on occasion I'll put out a webinar link that's public because it's an entirely different environment than even like this kind of Zoom call. And so in other words, like in a webinar, I can completely control. I can kick people out of the webinar. I can control audio. I can control video. And so again, it's circumstantial, but I think best practice is to limit access and only give access when needed and necessary. So that's the general rule of thumb.
Okay, I have one more question that we got in from an email, and then we will wrap up. But if anybody has any last comments or questions, feel free to go ahead and get them in the chat. So a common distraction at work, whether we're at home or in the office, tends to be social media these days. With our current news cycle, it seems like there are a million coronavirus updates all the time. We know while they're important, what are some ways you would recommend to be able to kind of tune things out and really focus on your work?
I think it's really critical to have your daily rituals in your ideal work week. If you're really disciplined about creating, being intentional about how you're going to work and what you're going to be focused on, that's the first step. The second step is literally just being disciplined, right? Like choosing discipline over this propensity to just always chase the next notification. So some of it to me is practical in terms of scheduling and prioritizing how you're going to do your work and what you're going to focus on. And then the second, way I would answer that is, it's like, we really have the same choice whether we're in the midst of the current situation or if it's in the future when hopefully all this passes. Are you going to be disciplined or not? And so it literally boils down to, are you going to make the decision to focus on what brings the most value to your team and to your clients, to your organization, or you're going to be undisciplined and chase notifications? And so there's no real secret to I think that it is literally, are you going to be disciplined or not? And I don't mean to sound so candid, but I think that's probably the most effective way to stay focused and to really prioritize things that bring the most amount of value.
Yeah, and I have nothing else to add. That's absolutely what I would say as well.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. Before we really end here, Kate, I know that your business is working on a website to help people stay updated on information. Do you mind to talk real briefly about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be quick. Our product team built a website called the Covet Business Finder. You just go to covetbusinessfinder.com. Kyle put it in the comments here. And it's a free website to both consumer and business. The data is completely secure. The data will only be utilized for the purpose of the website, but it's an all-in-one place for businesses to update their business information in terms of do they do deliver, are they closed, and basically keep consumers informed. It actually pulls up based on your location, not your exact location like your home address, but like by city. And so like if you pull it up right now, it'll identify that you're in Lubbock, and then it has a search functionality on all kinds of different types of businesses and allows you to see that business data. It also allows for bulk upload. So someone like the Chamber or LEDA or other organizations can do bulk uploads for their businesses. All the data is protected. It's your data. It'll only stay your data. But instead of everyone having to chase each individual platform that may or may not be updated by a business, it's a centralized location to really support businesses and understand, are they open, are they not open, et cetera, et cetera. And it's anywhere in the country because it picks up by location. So that's a quick overview. And it's totally free to the consumer and the business, no strings attached.
Great, thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Lubbock Chamber has put together a resource page with all sorts of information for businesses and how you can keep going during this challenging time. So again, Cade and Justin, thank you guys so much. I know this was really helpful for me. I hope it was for the rest of our attendees as well. And so for all of you guys that attended, thank you so much for being here. We hope to see you guys soon in person with the young professionals, and stay tuned in with the Lubbock Chamber. I'm sure they will keep you guys posted. So thank you guys. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye guys. Thanks.